Cool. Morning, thanks Rod, and thank you very much for having me here. It's a privilege to be in such a beautiful space and such a beautiful building. I wanted to say, it's interesting, I just have thought from that last talk as well, I think it's actually a gross destruction product. I think that's what that really is, because actually, I was reading a book by Derek Jensen, and he was saying, he was talking to a friend, he was saying it was really weird how the Nazis actually kind of wrote ledgers of all their atrocities, and like that seems really strange because you're going to get caught. And he's like, well, we've got ours, it's called GDP. That actually, most of the work that we see in GDP is just us extracting things, destroying them, and then wasting them. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that I'm not from here. I'm from the UK. I've been here for about 12 years, but I'm from the great colonising nation. And just sorry for everything, really, from the get-go. But I suppose it's important to acknowledge as well that we're all colonised as well internally. We're all colonised people. We're all colonised by this industrial civilization and the mentality that goes with it. So when I hear the Pepeha and I hear people talk about their spiritual land and Tangata Whenua, it rings for me. I was born and raised in Essex, just down the road from, in fact down the footpath, blessedly, from Hatfield Forest, which is known as the last medieval forest in Europe. Because it actually inhabits the same boundaries and has worked the same way as it has been since the 10th century. That's kind of where I stand and where I come from. I'm really interested to see you can't be kaitiaki from a distance. Whoops, I've moved here. So I know my retirement project will see me strapped to a tree there once more. I was a traditional woodsman there. I spent my childhood there. And it was part of a kind of neo-pagan movement that was also trying that gesture to reconnect. So it's lovely to be here with an ancient tradition that's based on that and 100% authentic. But that's where I find myself. That's me. That's who I am. But I fell in love with the Kiwi and I came over here to work for various NGOs. I've worked for WWF around the globe, Greenpeace, a lot of the environmental NGOs are the big names. But I ended up here. And I now work for the Sustainable Business Network. We're a network of 550 organisations around the country. And we work to empower businesses to work towards nature and people's enhancement. And that includes ECT, one of our members, 3R, I know are here, also one of our members. And the idea is to bring people together, to work together on those principles. But this is kind of, one of the major projects we've got is the circular economy, and probably I should say that within the context of the discussion so far, it's kind of the latest attempt for kind of industrial civilization to wake up to itself and go, oh, whoops, we've done everything wrong. And it's really just child's play. I suppose, going back to that picture before, that was my daughter in the water there, and kind of the reason I do this work is for her and her future. And, in the environmental movement for a long time, we've sort of said that, said, oh, it's for children. But, like, it's now actually going to be in their lifespan. It's not kind of in the future generations. As Mike very ably pointed out, in 10, 20, 30 years, it's going to be very, very different for them. And if we don't get this right, it's going to be very, very bad, let alone their children's lifespans. And I'll be around, hopefully, if I don't fall off a mountain bike, I will be around to see that, and I don't want to witness that. So we're often presented, the circular economy is often presented in this diagram, which can be kind of confusing and complex. But really, all we're looking at is a way of keeping products and resources and materials in circulation the whole time. So it basically addresses two major insanities of the industrial civilization, which is one, the Earth appears to be infinite. I don't think so. And the other one is that there's such a place as a way where you can throw things you don't want anymore, and they're going to disappear. Apparently a way just went away. Even China now says, no, we're not actually away. We're not taking your crap anymore. So what you end up with is these two cycles. So on the green side, essentially you've got the natural nutrients. Everything should be seen as a nutrient. Everything should be seen as a resource. So you've got these natural organic nutrients. And the bottom line to them is they should be things that you can bury in your garden, you can put in your compost heap, or you can eat, or you can reprocess that way. And they need to be that benign to be in that process. And the other side is the technical nutrients, which are the things that we've made, the plastics, the alloys, these complex materials that we've made. And I suppose where the circular economy is a new thing based on very old kind of what should be childish ideas, very simple ideas in that purity, is that we're trying to apply this now to very more complex industrial processes. The other thing that speaks to me is it's just about reconnection. All of this is just about reconnection. It's reconnection between ourselves and reality. It's reconnection between all of the products that we use and where they go, the whole of the processes. And that also means it has to be about collaboration. One of the other insanities we have in industrialised economies is it's competitive. We don't work together, we don't collaborate, we don't partnership unless there's an immediate money gain. Where in this game, that won't work. And we see that writ large in things like you take a coffee cup. If you've got a coffee cups, we all used to think it was just cardboard and paper. No, it's not. It's lined with a composite plastic that can peel off, so you can't actually recycle it whatsoever. It's basically toxic waste. You put it in a landfill. Oh, great, now we've got biodegradable cups. Problem is, they look exactly like the old ones, so no one knows where to put them. They end up in the landfill and actually toxify the landfill, or they get into the plastic streams and make that much more complex to pull out again. So we need to have the systems in place to deal with the ideas that we're putting forward as well. So one of the big things about the circular economy, and it's kind of moving on from sustainability and saying it's a design process, a way of thinking things all the way through, from start to finish. And so it partly came out of the cradle-to-cradle movement in the 80s and 90s as well. Inherent in that name is the idea, cradle to cradle. Nothing goes to the grave, it comes back, restarts. And you know, part of it is to say that we might have decided that we already got this with the whole sustainability thing, and to an extent, yeah, I can understand why many people think, oh, this is just another kind of the latest buzzword, the latest kind of way that we're talking about stuff, and we're kind of pushing our Brussels sprouts around the plate and not bothering to eat them. But I think what happened with sustainability is, unfortunately, it's kind of got captured over time and ends up with being seen as kind of, oh, if something's sustainable, it's a bit nicer. And if something's unsustainable, it's a bit of a problem. Whereas sustainability had a very simple definition, something that you can continue to do over time. If something is unsustainable, it's not that it's slightly problematic, it's that you just won't be able to do it over time. Unfortunately, we now have an entire economic system that's unsustainable, and we're seeing very clearly that it will not and cannot function over time. So, for me, the circular economy has become kind of the last chance saloon for a complex industrial society. If we want to have anything, and it is a big if, I'm not even sure we do want that, but if we do want that, then this is really our last chance to get that right. So we need to apply this as a design system. And one of the risks inherent in that is that what we end up doing is simply making really bad ideas kind of go on for longer. And I'll touch on that later on. So just to take a really simple example, the humble power drill, which often gets brought up in this one, we currently buy really cheap stuff from overseas. It's got lots of bonded materials in it, bonded plastics, bonded metals that you can't peel apart, you can't recycle the thing. They sit in our garage and rust, especially in mine, because I don't really like DIY, and they fall apart, or they just sit there and do nothing. I think someone said the average power tool gets used for about 14 minutes in its entire lifespan. People buy them, go, oh, I'm going to do that lovely. Oh, gone. When they break, we throw them in the bin. But instead, we could simply redesign this from the ground up. So we could say, what if it was made of renewable, thoroughly recyclable materials? What if we made it modular, so it's extremely easy to pull apart, so that when it's at the end of its lifespan, we can pull it apart and recycle all the produce, all those nutrients. What if it's modular, so we can add the new motor, the latest gizmo, you don't have to upgrade the whole thing, you can just upgrade the piece of kit. And what if we don't want to own them at all? I don't want a power drill, I don't want to store one. A lot of people don't want cars now, they don't want lots of other things. So in this new future, the idea is that we can have access to these tools when we need them through a subscription service, and you can use a really high quality tool that's got all those features, and then you get it out of your life again where you want, because you don't really, the insight is you're not really buying a tool. You don't want to own the tool, you want the job done. So you're buying holes. So similarly, Philips have a system now where they're selling light. They're literally selling lumens to you. You need a certain amount of light, we will supply the lights to you, we'll supply the wires to you. The company will then hold on to that material, they'll renew it, they'll sort it out, and then they can design it to last. They can design it to be more robust. We might want hand tools, And yeah, it's definitely not a new idea by any stretch of the imagination. But what is new is that it's the scale and the level at which it's now being addressed. The EU and China recently signed off on a memorandum of understanding. China's been working on the circular economy for about 20 years. I remember working for WWF in the mid-90s, and we sent a team over to China to see how things were going. And I remember sitting in the meeting, and they said, yeah, you know, you said that we were worried that they were building one coal-fired power station a week. Well, the bad news is it's two. And then they said, but they do have a handle on it. The idea, it's kind of the institutions there realise there is no way that they can raise their entire population to the sort of living standards that we're used to without wrecking their entire environment. So they are really interested in looking for solutions. The EU are spending over the next 4 years about 10 billion euros on specifically on circular economy projects, looking at plastics, innovation investment, turning waste into resources, and circular design and production processes. I mean, when we trade that off against how much money is being spent on the linear economy, the old economy, which extracts things out of the ground, turns them into products, and then tries to bury them or burn them, then it's tiny, but it's a start. And it means that in terms of New Zealand, it's a big game. And these are our big export countries. So for business people in New Zealand, we need to be speaking this language, and there's huge opportunities for us. And in today's markets, any solution to these sorts of problems can go global really, really quickly. So there's a huge opportunity there for us. So the other thing I should say is that the circular economy is not a fixed thing. You can't go out and buy a book on this, and it's absolute chapter and verse, it's everything that's there. There's a lot of new thinking going into it. So what I'm going to address is just the three main kind of key principles to it. And, you know, they seem really obvious, as that's what's quite terrifying, is surely this is the way we should have been doing things all along. But one thing I do say is the environmental movement has this wonderful thing on its side. It's called reality. And that will continue with like those two scissor jaws that Mike talked about, pushing and pushing until we finally do the right thing. I think it was appropriated to Winston Churchill, a quote that said, the Americans will do the right thing once they've exhausted every other possibility. And I see that in my own personal life, that's how I operate, and I can see that writ large in the civilization in which I live. So designing out waste and pollution. This is the other thing about the circular economy. Unfortunately, it's been frequently seen as addressing a waste issue. And that's the worst end of the chain. We shouldn't have a waste issue. The whole concept of the circular economy is that waste no longer exists. Everything becomes a nutrient, everything becomes useful. So the best place to design out those issues is on the drawing board, not once you've got something out there and you've already got a problem. So it's direct dematerialisation, and that's, can we create products using a great deal less materials from the get-go? Do we even need that product? How do we use it? Indirect dematerialisation, and probably demilitarisation as well, I should imagine, is how do we deliver those products to people? So we've seen that in the most obvious ways with things like music and media, where it's now you don't buy a CD in a big plastic box, you get it delivered to you digitally. But in circular economy terms, you need to think that through, because you've still got your computer, you've still got that system, you know, so everything has to, and there's no such thing as free lunch, you have to think it through. Vehicles and transportation is a big part of it, moving to electric vehicles, smarter transport systems. Renewable materials, because by their nature, they facilitate that cyclical process, and they're part of that cyclical process. But again, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Because all those materials come from somewhere and they go to somewhere. And it's not a natural, unnatural split. Some natural materials are really quite bad for you. Plutonium-235, it's natural, it's just not very good for you. So, you know, it's very easy for us to get caught up. So we need to think it all through. And new production methods. 3D printing's in its infancy, but the basics is that, you know, we still have, most of our processes still take vast amounts of material and cut holes out of them, cut things, and that creates waste, that creates extra. Whereas if you're creating from a single piece of material, you can be a bit more efficient. Same with building and construction. It's a wildly inefficient method to try and build a very complex house on a single site and have tradies drive backwards and forwards to it and create all their different kinds of waste. If you can factory build those and then deliver them on site, then you could have a much better embodied building, and people are looking at that. Principle 2, keep products and materials in use. So once you've actually created your thing, You want to keep it out there. They say the most efficient car on the market is the one you haven't built because you keep the old one. It's not quite true because of the efficiency of fuels, but you want to keep the good stuff out there. Once you've designed it properly, you don't want it to break down. So you improve the design, you make it more robust, more modular, you use better materials. The sharing access economy, we've already seen that with Airbnb, we see it with things like Mevo, with car sharing. Not having to own the thing in the first place means that company can then invest in a better quality of product and a better piece of kit so that it doesn't have to keep breaking down. So we don't have this, I want to own everything, but I haven't got the money for a decent one. Reuse and second hand, very old principle, but if these things are well designed, you should be able to pass them on. They should be more a legacy product rather than just for yourself for the next 2 to 5 years when they outdate themselves. Remanufacture and product stewardship. So product stewardship is just simply companies taking responsibility for the things that they've built. One of the massive insanities and externalizations we have is a company can build something that they know is going to create a problem in the system and then make loads of money out of it, and we will have to pay to pick up the mess. So instead, they keep an eye on what they're doing, they keep an eye on where their products end up. People like Resine are doing this. And the most obvious one is probably the printer in your own offices. If you work in an office, the Fuji Xerox printer is owned by Fuji Xerox. They will take it apart when it's done. They'll make more printers out of it. It makes sense to do that, rather than leaving materials stranded. So one of the big pieces of work we need to do is to develop the kind of reverse logistics so that once we've put stuff out into everybody's homes and offices, that we can actually get it back into those factories to recoup. And principle 3, the most important one of all, regenerate natural systems. We've wrecked so many natural systems around us that work much better than our economic systems, and we need them back. Renewable energy is a less impactful manner of doing that, although looking at hydroelectric dams and geothermal, it's not a free lunch. There are always prices to pay. Minimising further disruption to natural cycles, we need to stop breaking things, and we need to make sure our products don't break things. Rewilding to restore natural systems, we still have an awful lot of land that's just grass or just wasted that could be much more biodiverse, much more wilding. And you can use rooftops, you can design all sorts of systems to bring wildlife back to these areas. And return and recover biological resources to appropriate points in ecological systems. So in that green cycle we saw, it's about, okay, even if you've created something out of wool, you need to get it back to a spot where wool should be in the ecological system. Otherwise, you're going to disrupt more systems. Too much of a good thing is always a bad thing. And one of the concepts that comes through this is that there is actually no bad materials and there are no good materials. It's just making sure they're in the right place. Carbon is fine as long as you don't have it in your atmosphere, as long as you have it where it should be. Plutonium-235 is fine as long as you leave it buried, pretty much. Now, as I said, it's a new concept, and there's lots of thinking out there, so you'll encounter lots of different frameworks. This is the Resolve framework from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the UK, which is one of the leading lights of this. And it's another way of really just to list the kind of ways you can think about this and the sort of businesses that are involved. You can see there's some big players out there that are really getting quite serious about this now. And I'm just going to run through a few quick examples of ideas closer to home. This is Ethique. So all of these are winners or commended in the Sustainable Business Network Awards, Going Circular Award, which we have every year. Interestingly, one of the things we realised when getting entries through is that actually a lot of them are not fully circular ideas, they're kind of recycling ideas. So these are the leaders. I'll touch on that again in a sec, just before I finish. But I think basically looked at shampoo and went, why is it in a plastic bottle? Doesn't need it in a plastic bottle. And got rid of the plastic bottle, made it solid. Again, quite an old idea, but they've made sure their packaging is biodegradable, they do a living wage certified, it's made in New Zealand, it's fair trade where they can, it's vegan, it's cruelty-free. The company's grown 304 to 400% year on year. There's a huge appetite for products of this nature. Wishbone Design make children's bicycles. But from the get-go, they went, well, how do we make it so that it's modular, so we can take it apart, so you can buy parts for it, so you don't have to throw the thing away. It's a legacy toy, so it changes as the kid grows up. You can change from 3 wheels to 2 wheels to pedals in the same bike. And this one, they've actually taken recycled carpet from the USA, ground it down, put it into pellets, made it into the recycled bike, and the bike itself is recyclable. again, but that's not even ideal. It's like, why are we going so far away? Is plastic good? Should plastic really be in the mix there, or was the wooden product better? But they are thinking through everything that they do very, very carefully. And they even support the second-hand market. So they don't wait for people to have to sell their bike. They go, we can sell it on our website. We don't care. We just, we want to make sure that we get the most value out of the stuff that we're making. I think it's large scale as well. This is NZ AgBiz. They take waste materials from Fonterra and other dairy produce and turn it into cattle feed. So even in some of these horrendous agriculture systems, we can see ways in which we can lower the impact. Similarly, NIMI over in Auckland is EcoStock Supplies, and they take food from the supermarkets that's expired and reprocess it back into animal feeds. So one of the things we've got is a system with so much waste in it that there's an enormous amount of value just kind of lying around to be reprocessed. And there's a lot of businesses getting in there to do that. But we still have this challenge that every solution we kind of bring down the pipe, it has the danger of people thinking, oh, well, that's fine then, everything's going to be okay. And so we kind of always need to trade it up against the sort of things that Mike is talking about, saying, this isn't going to fix everything. We will need to have a much more simple life. And really what we're trying to sustain is not the way that we are now, but we're trying to shift and transform to a thoroughly different system. So we need to think across whole systems, and we need to radically change them. The danger is that we simply make the linear processes more efficient, and so they actually get more damaging. And human history has a terrible record on that if we make systems more efficient, we will tend to do more of them. We won't say, actually, the entire process is a bad one. So we also need to use these lenses to challenge the processes in their entirety and make sure that we're genuinely changing things and we're genuinely pushing the dial. One of the biggest concerns I had recently was we put out a survey to our membership last year, and they said 40% of people said that they understood the circular economy and they were installing it in their business. And at one point we thought, that sounds great, but no, I don't think you are, and I don't think you understand what we're talking about yet. So there's this terrible risk of rapid adoption and going, well, okay, our bins used to be sustainable, now our bin is circular economy. It's like, no, that hasn't changed the bin. We need to work out how we can thoroughly change things. So really what we're looking at is a rehabilitation of the industrial civilization, if indeed it's even possible. And I think it's going to be a very radical shift. And I think there's going to be a lot of businesses out there that if they follow the logic through this, they simply will not need to exist. And that is a huge challenge for them, especially within the framework in which I work. So it's up to us to kind of, one of the things that we've taken on at SBN is to try to hold on to the concept and make sure it doesn't get watered down so that in 10, 15 years' time, we're not talking about things that are more circular in the same way we're talking about things being slightly more sustainable. Thanks very much.